behind the gilded gates of Buckingham Palace, where centuries of tradition meet modern ambition, a quiet war is brewing. The world sees perfectly coordinated royal appearances, synchronized smiles, and carefully orchestrated public events. But what happens when the cameras stop rolling and the palace doors close? In the marble corridors where whispers carry farther than shouts, two women stand on opposite sides of an invisible battlefield. One, a commoner who married into royalty and captured the world's heart. The other, a woman who waited decades in the shadows before claiming her crown. Between them stands a future king, torn between duty to his stepmother and devotion to his wife. This isn't just about royal protocol or seating arrangements at state dinners. This is about power, legacy, and the very soul of the British monarchy. When personal ambitions clash with royal duties, when family loyalty battles institutional hierarchy, and when the future of the crown hangs in the balance, even the most carefully guarded secrets begin to surface. What you're about to discover goes beyond tabloid headlines and palace statements. This is the untold story of how a seemingly perfect royal family found itself at the center of the most significant internal conflict the monarchy has faced in generations. A story where every curtsy carries meaning, every public appearance is a chess move, and every smile hides a deeper truth. The question isn't whether this battle will reshape the royal family forever. The question is who will emerge victorious when the dust settles on this palace power struggle. The morning sun cast long shadows across the east terrace of Windsor Castle as Catherine, Princess of Wales, carefully adjusted her pearl earrings in the gilded mirror of her private dressing room. The October air carried the scent of autumn leaves and the distant sound of groundskeepers preparing the estate for another day of royal duties. But today felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a tension that seemed to vibrate through the ancient stone walls of the castle. She had received the message at precisely 7:30 that morning. A formal request, delivered on cream-colored palace stationery with the royal seal, asking for her presence in the Queen Consort's private study at 11 o'clock. No explanation, no context, just the polite but unmistakably commanding tone that Camilla had perfected over the years. Catherine knew this wasn't a social call. 3 floors below, in the ornate study that had once belonged to Queen Elizabeth II, Camilla sat behind an imposing mahogany desk reviewing a stack of correspondence. Her fingers drummed rhythmically against the leather-bound desk pad, a habit she had developed during her years of waiting, watching, and calculating her way into the heart of the royal family. At 76, she had learned that patience was a virtue, but timing was everything. The relationship between the two women had always been complex, layered with the kind of diplomatic courtesy that masked deeper currents of ambition and territorial instinct. Catherine represented the future of the monarchy, young and vibrant, beloved by the public in a way that reminded many of Diana's early years. Camilla, on the other hand, embodied hard-won acceptance, a woman who had weathered decades of public scrutiny to finally claim her place as queen consort. But recent events had shifted the delicate balance of power within the royal household. King Charles's health concerns, though carefully managed and downplayed in public statements, had created an atmosphere of uncertainty that rippled through every level of the royal hierarchy. William, as heir apparent, found himself taking on increasingly significant responsibilities, and with those responsibilities came influence that hadn't gone unnoticed by his stepmother. The tension had been building for months, manifesting in small but significant ways. There was the matter of the Christmas arrangements, where Camilla had quietly suggested changes to long-standing traditions that would elevate her own family's prominence during the holidays. Catherine had politely but firmly expressed her concerns, noting that certain traditions held special meaning for the younger generation of royals and their children. Then came the issue of royal patronages. Several prestigious organizations were seeking new royal patrons, and the distribution of these roles had become a carefully watched indicator of status within the family. Camilla had been advocating for a redistribution that would see her taking on some of the more prominent positions, arguing that as queen consort, she deserved recognition commensurate with her rank. Catherine, however, had her own vision for how these roles should be allocated, one that prioritized merit and genuine passion for the causes over hierarchical considerations. The most recent flashpoint had occurred just 2 weeks earlier during a state dinner for visiting dignitaries. The seating arrangement, a matter of crucial diplomatic and hierarchical significance, had been the subject of intense behind-the-scenes negotiations. Camilla's team had pushed for placement that would emphasize her role as queen consort, while Catherine's supporters argued for arrangements that reflected the reality of public interest and media attention. William had found himself caught in the middle, trying to balance respect for his father's wife with support for his own spouse. His position was particularly delicate because he genuinely cared for both women, recognizing Camilla's positive influence on his father's happiness, while being deeply protective of Catherine's well-being and status within the family. The breakfast incident 3 days earlier had been the final straw. During a family gathering at Clarence's house, Camilla had made what appeared to be an offhand comment about the importance of experience and maturity in royal duties. The comment, delivered with a smile, but carrying an unmistakable edge, had been directed toward Catherine in front of other family members. It was the kind of sophisticated slight that couldn't be openly challenged without appearing petty, but its meaning was crystal clear to everyone present. Catherine had maintained her composure, responding with a grace that had made her a favorite among royal watchers worldwide. But privately, she had been deeply hurt and increasingly concerned about what appeared to be a systematic attempt to undermine her position within the family hierarchy. The comment had been particularly painful because it seemed to dismiss the decade of service she had already given to the crown and the genuine connection she had built with the British people. William's reaction had been immediate and visible, despite his attempts to maintain diplomatic neutrality. Those who knew him well could see the tightening around his eyes, the slight stiffening of his posture that indicated his protective instincts had been triggered. After the gathering, he had requested a private meeting with his father, a conversation that had lasted well over an hour and ended with both men looking troubled and somewhat strained. The palace staff, with their finely tuned antenna for royal dynamics, had begun to notice the subtle shifts in routine that indicated underlying tension. Meeting schedules were being carefully coordinated to minimize overlap between certain parties. Staff assignments were being adjusted with unusual frequency. Even the normally routine task of coordinating official photographs required additional layers of approval and negotiation. Lady Susan Morrison, Catherine's private secretary, had become particularly skilled at navigating these new diplomatic challenges. A former civil servant with decades of experience in delicate negotiations, she understood that royal conflicts required the same careful management as international diplomatic crises. Every email, every scheduling decision, every public appearance needed to be analyzed for its potential impact on the delicate balance of relationships within the royal family. Meanwhile, Charles found himself in an impossible position. His love for Camilla was genuine and deep, born from years of shared experiences and mutual support through difficult times. She had been his anchor during the tumultuous period following Diana's death, providing stability and comfort when he had desperately needed both. Her intelligence, wit, and unwavering loyalty had made her indispensable to his personal happiness and his effectiveness as a royal. But Charles also recognized the importance of William and Catherine to the monarchy's future. Catherine's popularity with the public was undeniable, and her partnership with William represented the kind of modern, relatable royalty that would be essential for the institution's continued relevance. The king understood that any perception of conflict between his wife and his daughter-in-law could have serious implications for the monarchy's stability and public standing. The media, always alert to signs of royal drama, had begun to pick up on subtle signals that suggested all was not well within the family. Royal correspondents, with their trained eyes for body language and protocol deviations, had started noting small but potentially significant changes in public appearances. The usual warm interactions between Camilla and Catherine had become more formal, more carefully choreographed. Social media analysts had begun tracking engagement patterns on royal family posts, noting shifts in public sentiment that seemed to reflect an awareness of underlying tensions. Comment sections that had once been filled with general admiration for royal appearances now included more pointed observations about relationships and dynamics within the family. The international press had also taken notice, with royal correspondents from around the world beginning to ask more probing questions about family unity and the succession planning. The questions were still diplomatic and respectful, but they indicated a growing awareness that something significant was developing within the royal household. As 11 o'clock approached, Catherine made her way through the familiar corridors of Windsor Castle, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floors. She passed portraits of previous queens and consorts, women who had navigated their own complex relationships within the royal system. Some had succeeded in building lasting legacies, while others had been forgotten or overshadowed by the more dramatic figures around them. She understood that this meeting would likely determine the trajectory of her own relationship with Camilla and, by extension, her position within the royal family for years to come. The stakes couldn't be higher, and both women knew it. This wasn't just about personal feelings or family dynamics. It was about the future direction of an institution that had survived and thrived for centuries by adapting to changing circumstances while maintaining its essential character. The conversation that was about to take place would echo through the halls of royal power for years to come, setting precedents and establishing boundaries that would shape how the monarchy operated in the modern era. Both women had spent years preparing for this moment, though neither had expected it to arrive under these particular circumstances. As Catherine approached the door to Camilla's study, she took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. Whatever happened in the next hour would change everything. The heavy oak door opened with barely a whisper, and Catherine stepped into the queen consort's private study. The room was a masterpiece of understated elegance, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes, Persian rugs that had witnessed decades of royal conversations, and tall windows that offered a commanding view of the castle's manicured gardens. Camilla rose from behind her desk, her movements graceful despite her years, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit that spoke of quiet authority. The greeting was cordial, but formal, each woman measuring the other with practiced royal precision. They had performed this dance many times before, but today there was an underlying current of purpose that neither could ignore. Camilla gestured toward two wingback chairs positioned near the fireplace, away from the imposing presence of her desk, suggesting a conversation between equals rather than a formal audience. As they settled into their chairs, the silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of unspoken concerns and carefully calculated strategies. Catherine noticed the subtle details that revealed Camilla's state of mind. The slight tightness around her eyes that suggested a sleepless night, the way her fingers briefly touched the sapphire brooch at her throat, a gesture that usually indicated she was choosing her words with particular care. Camilla began with pleasantries about the children, asking after George, Charlotte, and Louis with what appeared to be genuine warmth. But Catherine recognized the diplomatic preamble, the careful establishment of common ground before more challenging topics were broached. They discussed upcoming royal engagements, the success of recent charitable events, and the logistics of the approaching holiday season, each response carefully measured and polite. The shift came gradually, almost imperceptibly, when Camilla mentioned concerns about public perception and the importance of presenting a united front during what she described as challenging times for the monarchy. The phrase hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that both women understood perfectly. It was Camilla's opening move, a seemingly reasonable statement that actually laid the groundwork for more pointed observations to follow. Catherine responded with equal diplomacy, expressing her own commitment to royal duty and her appreciation for the guidance she had received from more experienced family members. But Her choice of words subtly emphasized her own decade of service and the public trust she had earned through her dedication to royal responsibilities. It was a gentle but firm reminder that she was not a newcomer seeking acceptance, but an established member of the royal team with her own legitimate authority. The conversation began to reveal its true purpose when Camilla raised the topic of coordination and consultation within the royal household. She spoke eloquently about the importance of ensuring that all senior royals were properly informed about significant decisions, particularly those that might affect the monarchy's public image or traditional protocols. Her tone remained pleasant and reasonable, but Catherine recognized the underlying message. She was being told to seek approval rather than acting independently. This touched on one of the most sensitive aspects of their relationship. Catherine had increasingly been taking initiative on royal matters, proposing new approaches to charitable work, suggesting innovations in how the royal family engaged with young people, and developing her own distinctive style of royal representation. Her confidence had grown with experience, and she had begun to see herself as a co-leader rather than a follower in royal affairs. Camilla's response to this evolution had been mixed. On one hand, she appreciated Catherine's dedication and effectiveness. The younger woman's natural charisma and genuine warmth had undoubtedly benefited the royal family's public standing. But Camilla also recognized the potential threat that Catherine's growing influence represented to the established hierarchy that placed her, as queen consort, in a position of senior authority among the royal women. The discussion moved to specific recent incidents that had apparently caused concern within royal circles. Camilla mentioned, with careful diplomatic language, that some of Catherine's recent initiatives had proceeded without what she termed appropriate consultation with senior family members. She cited the environmental education program that Catherine had launched with several prestigious schools, noting that while the initiative was admirable, the process of developing and announcing it had bypassed traditional royal approval mechanisms. Catherine felt a familiar flash of frustration at this critique. The environmental program had been months in development, carefully researched and planned with input from educational experts and environmental scientists. The decision to proceed without extensive royal committee review had been deliberate, based on her assessment that too much bureaucratic oversight would have diluted the program's effectiveness and delayed its implementation beyond the optimal timing for maximum impact. She responded with measured firmness, explaining her rationale for the approach she had taken while acknowledging the value of coordination within the royal system. But she also made it clear that she believed royal work required a balance between respect for tradition and responsiveness to contemporary needs. Her words were carefully chosen to avoid direct confrontation while establishing her right to exercise independent judgment in matters within her area of expertise. The tension in the room became more palpable as both women began to speak more directly about their concerns. Camilla expressed worry about what she saw as a trend toward fragmentation within the royal family, with different members pursuing separate agendas rather than working within a coordinated framework. She spoke about the importance of presenting a unified message to the public and avoiding the appearance of internal disagreement or competition. Catherine recognized this as a reference to media coverage that had begun to contrast her approach to royal work with that of other family members, sometimes in ways that implicitly criticized the more traditional methods favored by senior royals. She had been aware of this dynamic and had tried to avoid anything that might be perceived as deliberate positioning against other family members. But she also believed that healthy evolution and innovation were essential for the monarchy's continued relevance. The conversation took a more personal turn when Camilla raised concerns about what she described as mixed messages regarding royal priorities and values. She mentioned specific instances where Catherine's public statements or choice of focus had seemed to diverge from established royal messaging, creating what palace communication staff had characterized as narrative confusion among media and public audiences. This touched on one of Catherine's deepest frustrations with royal protocol. She believed strongly that authentic engagement required the freedom to speak genuinely about issues that mattered to her and to the people she met during royal visits. The scripted, carefully sanitized approach that had characterized royal communication in earlier eras felt increasingly inadequate for connecting with contemporary audiences who valued sincerity and substance over polished perfection. But she also understood Camilla's concerns about consistency and coordination. The royal family's public impact depended partly on their ability to present coherent messages that reinforced rather than contradicted each other. Too much individual expression could indeed lead to confusion about what the monarchy stood for and what its priorities were. As they continued to talk, both women began to reveal more of their fundamental perspectives on royal service and leadership. Camilla emphasized stability, continuity, and the hard-won wisdom that came from decades of experience navigating royal expectations and public scrutiny. She spoke passionately about the importance of protecting the institution's dignity and preserving the protocols that had enabled the monarchy to survive and flourish through centuries of social and political change. Catherine articulated her own vision of royal service, one that honored tradition while embracing innovation and authentic connection with the people they served. She described her belief that the monarchy's future depended on its ability to remain relevant and responsive to contemporary needs, which sometimes required departing from established approaches in favor of more effective alternatives. The philosophical differences between them became increasingly clear as the conversation progressed. Camilla saw herself as a guardian of royal tradition, someone who had earned her position through patience, loyalty, and careful adherence to established protocols. Catherine viewed herself as a modernizing force, bringing fresh perspectives and innovative approaches that would ensure the monarchy's continued vitality and public support. Neither perspective was inherently wrong, but they pointed toward fundamentally different visions for how the royal family should operate and evolve. The challenge was finding a way to honor both approaches without allowing their differences to create destructive conflict that could damage the institution they both sought to serve. As the morning wore on, both women began to recognize that this conversation represented more than just a discussion of recent incidents or coordination concerns. They were essentially negotiating the future balance of power within the royal family and establishing the framework within which they would coexist as senior royal women with overlapping responsibilities and sometimes competing visions. The stakes of this negotiation extended far beyond their personal relationship. The outcome would influence how the monarchy adapted to changing social expectations, how it balanced tradition with innovation, and how it managed the complex dynamics of a multi-generational institution with multiple centers of influence and authority. By the time their formal discussion concluded, both women understood that they had reached a temporary détente rather than a permanent resolution. The fundamental tensions between their approaches would continue to require ongoing management and negotiation. But they had also established a framework for direct communication about their concerns and a mutual recognition of each other's legitimate authority within the royal system. The conversation ended with expressions of mutual respect and commitment to working together for the good of the monarchy. But as Catherine made her way back through the castle corridors, she knew that the real work of managing their relationship and its implications for the royal family was just beginning. The news reached William through a carefully worded message from his private secretary while he was attending a veterans charity event in Birmingham. The brief text simply stated that the Princess of Wales requests your earliest convenience for a private discussion regarding family coordination matters. William recognized the coded language immediately. Catherine would never use such formal phrasing unless the situation had reached a critical juncture. He excused himself from the remaining events of the day, citing urgent royal business, and made the 2-hour journey back to Windsor in contemplative silence. His protection officer, accustomed to William's occasional need for solitary reflection during travel, maintained appropriate distance while remaining alert to his principal's emotional state. The heir apparent's jaw was set in a way that suggested serious concerns were weighing on his mind. Catherine was waiting in their private sitting room when he arrived, her usually composed demeanor showing subtle signs of strain. She had changed from her formal meeting attire into more casual clothes, but her posture remained rigid with tension. The afternoon light streaming through their windows cast long shadows across the antique furniture that had witnessed decades of royal family discussions, both joyful and troubled. She recounted the morning's conversation with methodical precision, sharing not just the words that had been exchanged, but also the underlying currents of meaning and implication that had flowed beneath the surface of their diplomatic dialogue. William listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly serious as he absorbed the full scope of what had transpired and what it might mean for their family's future. The situation was more complex than even Catherine initially realized. William revealed information that provided crucial context for understanding Camilla's recent behavior and the pressure she was facing within royal circles. There had been discussions among senior royal advisors about succession planning and the gradual transition of responsibilities that would eventually accompany his father's advancing age. These conversations had naturally focused attention on the roles and relationships that would define the monarchy's next phase. Some palace traditionalists had apparently expressed concerns about what they perceived as an accelerated timeline for William and Catherine's assumption of senior leadership roles. While no one questioned their competence or dedication, there were whispers about whether the transition was proceeding too quickly and whether sufficient deference was being shown to established hierarchies within the royal system. Camilla, as Charles's wife and partner, had found herself in the uncomfortable position of defending not just her own status, but also her husband's continued vitality and capacity for leadership. The suggestion that the younger generation might be ready to assume greater authority carried implicit criticism of Charles's current performance and decision-making, criticism that Camilla took personally and politically. William's insight into these dynamics helped Catherine understand that their conflict wasn't simply about personality differences or personal ambition. They were caught up in larger institutional tensions about leadership transition, generational change, and the pace of royal evolution. Camilla's recent behavior reflected her genuine concern about protecting Charles's position and ensuring that his contributions to the monarchy were properly recognized and valued. But understanding the context didn't resolve the fundamental problem. Catherine still felt that her authority and independence were being challenged in ways that could undermine her effectiveness as a senior royal. William found himself torn between loyalty to his father and stepmother on one side, and support for his wife's legitimate concerns on the other. The couple spent hours discussing potential approaches to managing the situation without creating permanent damage to family relationships or public confidence in royal unity. They considered various diplomatic strategies, from private family conversations to more formal mediation through trusted royal advisors. Each option carried risks and potential benefits that needed careful evaluation. Meanwhile, 3 miles away at Clarence House, Charles was having his own difficult conversation with Camilla about the morning's events and their implications. His wife had briefed him on her discussion with Catherine, presenting her perspective on what needed to happen to maintain proper royal protocols and family harmony. But Charles could see the strain that the situation was creating for everyone involved, including Camilla herself. His position was particularly delicate because he understood and sympathized with concerns on both sides of the conflict. He appreciated Camilla's loyalty and her genuine desire to protect his interests and dignity. Her years of support through challenging times had earned his deep gratitude and trust. But he also recognized Catherine's growing confidence and competence as a royal, and he didn't want to stifle the innovation and fresh thinking she brought to royal work. Charles had witnessed firsthand how rigid adherence to traditional approaches could sometimes hinder the monarchy's effectiveness in addressing contemporary challenges. Catherine's willingness to experiment with new methods and her natural ability to connect with diverse audiences had demonstrably benefited royal causes and public engagement. Suppressing these strengths in the name of protocol coordination seemed counterproductive and potentially damaging. But He also understood the importance of maintaining institutional coherence and avoiding the appearance of internal competition or disagreement among senior royals. The monarchy's strength had historically depended on its ability to present unified leadership even when individual members had different perspectives or approaches to their work. The king found himself contemplating solutions that might honor both the need for coordination and the value of individual initiative within appropriate boundaries. This would require delicate negotiation and possibly some evolution of traditional protocols to accommodate the reality of having multiple strong, capable senior royals with their own areas of expertise and public followings. As evening approached, William made a decision that would prove crucial to resolving the immediate crisis. He requested a private meeting with his father, one that would include frank discussion about family dynamics and the challenges they were all facing in managing the transition to a new phase of royal leadership. The conversation would need to address not just the specific conflict between Catherine and Camilla, but also the broader questions about roles, responsibilities, and authority that were driving that conflict. The meeting was arranged for the following morning, with both men understanding that the outcome would significantly influence the royal family's internal dynamics for years to come. William prepared carefully, knowing that he needed to balance respect for his father's position with advocacy for his wife's legitimate concerns and his own vision for the monarchy's future direction. Catherine spent the evening reviewing her own approach to the situation, considering what compromises she might be willing to make and what principles she needed to maintain regardless of the personal cost. She had worked too hard and invested too much in her royal role to accept an arrangement that would significantly limit her ability to contribute meaningfully to royal work and public service. The couple's children, blissfully unaware of the adult tensions swirling around them, provided welcome distraction and perspective during family dinner and evening routines. George, Charlotte, and Louis reminded their parents of the broader purpose behind royal service and the importance of maintaining family harmony for their sake, as well as for institutional reasons. As they tucked their children into bed, William and Catherine renewed their commitment to finding solutions that would protect both their family relationships and Catherine's position within the royal system. They understood that the coming days would require all their diplomatic skills and emotional resilience, but they faced the challenge united in their determination to emerge stronger rather than diminished by the crisis. The palace staff, meanwhile, continued their professional duties with characteristic discretion, but the tension was palpable throughout the royal household. Senior advisors found themselves walking carefully between competing loyalties and trying to anticipate how various outcomes might affect their own positions and responsibilities. The uncertainty created an atmosphere of heightened vigilance and political calculation that affected everything from meeting schedules to menu planning for official events. International royal correspondents began to notice subtle changes in official announcements and public appearances that suggested possible internal tensions. While nothing had been explicitly confirmed or denied, experienced observers of royal protocol detected signs that suggested all was not completely harmonious within the family. Questions began to be asked, politely but persistently, about coordination between different royal offices and the decision-making process for major royal initiatives. The pressure of external scrutiny added another layer of urgency to the need for internal resolution. Whatever arrangements were ultimately reached would need to satisfy not just the family members directly involved, but also the broader royal system that depended on clear chains of authority and consistent public messaging. As night fell over Windsor Castle and Clarence House, four of the most powerful people in Britain prepared for conversations that would shape the monarchy's future direction and determine whether the current crisis would strengthen or weaken the institution they all served. The stakes could hardly have been higher, and all parties understood that the decisions made in the coming days would echo through the royal system for generations to come. The private library at Clarence House had witnessed countless significant royal conversations throughout its distinguished history, but rarely had it hosted a discussion with such far-reaching implications for the monarchy's future. Charles sat across from William in the same leather chairs where he had once received guidance from his own mother about the complexities of royal duty and family relationships. The morning light filtered through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air between father and son like tiny representations of the delicate issues they were about to address. William had arrived early, using the extra time to walk through the gardens where he had played as a child during visits to his father's residence. The familiar surroundings provided some comfort, but they also reminded him of how much had changed since those simpler days when royal hierarchy seemed straightforward and family relationships were less complicated by competing responsibilities and public expectations. Charles opened the conversation by acknowledging the difficulty of their situation and expressing his genuine desire to find solutions that would serve everyone's best interests. His voice carried the weight of decades spent navigating similar challenges, though perhaps none quite as personally complex as the current tension between his wife and his daughter-in-law. He had learned through hard experience that royal family conflicts could have consequences far beyond the immediate participants, affecting public confidence, staff morale, and the monarchy's overall effectiveness. The king began by sharing his perspective on recent events, including details that helped William understand the pressures Camilla had been facing from various quarters within the royal establishment. There had been subtle but persistent questioning of her judgment on several recent matters, criticism that she had interpreted as attempts to undermine her authority as queen consort. Her response to Catherine's increasing independence had been influenced by her need to demonstrate strong leadership and maintain her own credibility within the royal system. Charles also revealed his awareness of the broader institutional tensions that were complicating family relationships. Senior palace advisors had been engaged in ongoing discussions about succession planning and the gradual transition of responsibilities that would accompany his own aging. While these conversations were natural and necessary, they had created an atmosphere of uncertainty and competition that was affecting everyone's behavior and decision-making. William listened carefully to his father's analysis while formulating his own response to the complex dynamics at play. He recognized the validity of concerns about coordination and consultation within the royal system, but he also felt strongly that Catherine's growing confidence and initiative should be supported rather than constrained. The monarchy needed leaders who could adapt to changing circumstances and connect authentically with contemporary audiences, qualities that Catherine had demonstrated consistently throughout her decade of royal service. The heir apparent chose his words carefully as he explained Catherine's perspective on recent events and her concerns about how the situation might affect her ability to contribute meaningfully to royal work. He emphasized her commitment to royal duty and her respect for established protocols, while also advocating for her right to exercise appropriate independence within her areas of responsibility and expertise. William's presentation was diplomatic but firm, making clear that he would not accept arrangements that significantly limited Catherine's authority or subjected her to excessive oversight that didn't apply equally to other senior royals. He had watched his wife invest tremendous energy and dedication in her royal role, earning public trust and developing genuine expertise in areas ranging from early childhood development to mental health advocacy. Constraining her ability to exercise that expertise would be counterproductive for the monarchy as well as unfair to Catherine personally. Charles found himself impressed by his son's mature handling of the delicate negotiation, recognizing leadership qualities that would serve him well when he eventually ascended to the throne. The king had worried about how William would manage the complex balance between personal loyalty and institutional responsibility, but his son's approach demonstrated both emotional intelligence and strategic thinking that suggested he was ready for greater authority within the royal system. The conversation gradually evolved into a broader discussion about the monarchy's future direction and the roles that different family members would play in its continued evolution. Charles shared his vision for a more streamlined, efficient royal system that would focus resources on the most effective activities while maintaining the dignity and traditions that gave the monarchy its unique character and authority. This vision included recognition that William and Catherine would naturally assume increasing responsibility as they matured in their roles and as Charles himself aged. Rather than resisting this transition, he wanted to manage it thoughtfully to ensure continuity and stability while allowing for necessary innovation and adaptation to changing circumstances. William appreciated his father's openness about these long-term considerations and shared his own thoughts about how the monarchy might evolve to remain relevant and effective in the 21st century. He believed strongly in the value of the institution, but recognized that its survival depended on its ability to adapt and respond to contemporary needs and expectations. The discussion touched on specific areas where better coordination might be beneficial without limiting individual initiative and creativity. They explored possibilities for more regular communication between senior royal offices, shared planning for major initiatives, and clearer protocols for situations where different royals' activities might overlap or conflict. Charles suggested the possibility of establishing more formal consultation mechanisms that would ensure appropriate coordination while preserving each senior royal's authority within their recognized areas of expertise. This approach would acknowledge the reality that the monarchy now included multiple capable leaders with different strengths and interests, rather than a single dominant figure supported by subordinate family members. As they continued talking, both men began to see possibilities for resolution that would address legitimate concerns on all sides while strengthening rather than weakening the royal system's overall effectiveness. The key would be finding language and structures that satisfied Camilla's need for respect and consultation while preserving Catherine's independence and initiative. William proposed a direct conversation between himself and Camilla, one that would allow him to express his support for her position while also advocating for Catherine's concerns and establishing clear boundaries for future interactions. This approach would demonstrate respect for family hierarchy while protecting his wife's interests and ensuring that similar conflicts could be prevented in the future. Charles endorsed this proposal while suggesting that he would also speak privately with Camilla about the broader context of their family's evolution and the importance of supporting rather than constraining Catherine's continued development as a senior royal. The combination of these conversations would hopefully create space for more constructive relationship dynamics going forward. They also discussed the possibility of involving trusted advisors in developing more systematic approaches to coordination and communication within the royal family. Several senior staff members had deep experience with royal protocol and family dynamics that could be valuable in creating sustainable solutions to the challenges they were facing. The meeting concluded with both men feeling cautiously optimistic about the possibilities for resolving the immediate crisis and preventing similar conflicts in the future. They had identified specific steps that could be taken immediately, while also beginning to plan for longer-term changes that would better accommodate the reality of having multiple strong leaders within the royal family. Charles expressed his appreciation for William's mature approach to the situation and his evident care for all family members, including Camilla. The king understood that his son's willingness to advocate firmly but respectfully for Catherine's position demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership qualities that would be essential for the monarchy's future success. William left Clarence House with a clear sense of next steps and renewed confidence that solutions could be found that would satisfy everyone's core concerns. But he also understood that implementing these solutions would require continued patience, diplomacy, and commitment from all parties involved. The afternoon was spent in careful preparation for the conversation with Camilla that would take place the following day. William consulted with Catherine about key points to emphasize and potential compromises that might help bridge the gap between their different perspectives on royal coordination and authority. Meanwhile, Charles began his own delicate conversation with Camilla about the morning's discussion and the path forward that he believed would best serve their family and the monarchy. This conversation would prove equally crucial to the ultimate resolution of their complex situation, requiring all the diplomatic skills that both had developed through their years of navigating royal relationships and responsibilities.